Hello everyone, welcome back to Scarecrow Joe's studio. This is the final segment, so part 5 on our paper mache zombie head tutorial. In this final segment, it's all about painting and then sealing our zombie heads to protect it from weather. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. Please consider subscribing. There's a ton of tutorials on this channel, beginning, intermediate, and advanced tutorials. So take a look at all those. But let's jump right into starting the paint on our zombie heads. Step in the paint process, and what I have done is I covered the eye or the ping pong ball with some masking tape because I don't want the base color or any other color for that matter to get onto that eyeball there, because I'm going to paint that in some different colors. So cover that up unless you want it to be blocked out in black. And that brings me to the first part. I'm going to paint the entire thing in black paint. And then after that dries, I'm going to dry brush some white over it, and we'll get to that. But pretty simple. What I'm using is just a flat black interior latex paint. It's acrylic latex enamel, so it will help with waterproofing. I'm not going to say waterproofing, but it will make it more water repellent or water resistant, along with the sealant that we're going to be putting on it after it's completely painted. So that's what I'm going to use, and I'm applying that with just a 1-inch chip brush here. And if you recall in our the last segment in part 4, where we finished up the sculpt and we put the tongue in there, and we raised the tongue using a plastic utensil such as this picnic fork here. So all of this is completely dry. It took about 3 days. So it's time to remove that fork, pull that out just like that. As you can see, the tongue is still raised. So that's the way that looks from the side. I'm going to go ahead and pop this can of paint open. And then we're going to be ready to start applying our base coat of black paint. I'm going to start on the back. The other thing is that if you don't happen to have the funds to go out and buy a quart or any size can of the interior, exterior latex paint, and you just have craft paint that's black and you have enough of it to cover your project, just use your black craft paint, because we are going to be sealing the whole thing with a spray spar polyurethane to protect it from moisture or rain, anything like that. That's the big thing that's going to protect it. So don't worry about that. I'm going to go ahead and continue and block out or paint out, cover this entire zombie head in this flat black paint. When you're applying your black base coat, because of the high texture and all of the different damage points that we put in here to resemble flesh rotting away and whatnot, where we carved in or carved out some of our clay in there, could be a little difficult to get the black paint all the way in there. Just do the best that you can. It's not going to matter in the end result. It won't even be seen, because we're going to be putting so many other layers of paint on this. All right, I have allowed black paint on here to dry for a couple of hours. You do want to make sure that it is dry. If you have any spots on here with black paint that are wet, let them dry. If you don't, when you go to this next step, which is dry brushing on the white, and your black paint is not dry, you're going to make a mess with it. It's going to smear. It's not going to look right. So make sure it's dry. Give it at least a couple of hours. And I just want to point out a couple of things here before we move on. So this eye here that I blocked in with some of the paper towel, that does not have the ping pong ball eye in there. So I didn't actually get in there completely, as you can see. Hopefully you can see if I turn it this way. I didn't get a whole lot of black paint all the way in there. I'm not concerned about it. We're going to put some other different colors of paint in there. But I did take a good amount of time, and I made sure that I did a decent job blocking it all out in the black paint. There's a few areas where there's some spots that, you know, I didn't quite get completely. You're going to have spots like that. Right here, it really is not that big of a deal. We're going to go in and dry brush some white. The paint that I'm using to dry brush white on, I've already taken the lid off, so I need to be careful. The paint is just a white latex primer. It's an exterior. It doesn't really matter. You can get just a straight white primer. It could be interior, exterior, as long as it's not oil-based, so that it doesn't smell so bad, especially if you are painting and using it indoors, such as, you know, my studio here. I got this really cheap. I think it was only a few bucks at my local big box store because they were going to mix this paint, and they were training someone in the paints department, and they messed up. And so they put this on sale for like $3 or something. So when you are looking for paint, check the oops or the damage section in your local hardware store, because they may have some pretty good deals on that. Okay, when I am dry brushing, I always start on the back of my sculptures. The reason that I do that is because if I get a little bit too much paint on, you know, and it's just the back, I'm starting out and trying to get the feel for it, it's not that big of a deal. I don't need to feel like I need to go back over and cover it up with the black paint again. So I have a piece of paper towel here. I have my white paint, and I have another chip brush here. This is another 1-inch chip brush. You can get these super cheap, and for dry brushing, what I like to do is I cut the bristles down. I don't want the big, long bristles, so I cut them down. I just feel like it's easier to work with. So I just take dip my brush into some of my paint here, and then on my paper towel, I just go in with my paper towel and knock off a bunch of that paint. And again, I'm going to start on the back and just sort of make my way up. And here you can see I got probably a little bit too much white paint, but that's why I start on the back. I've talked about this in many of my other tutorials where I've finished up a project or a tutorial by painting and sealing the sculptures, that with this type of clay, when you use the dry brush technique, it picks up so much of the texture. So all of that really cool texture that I spent so much time putting in there, the dry brush is going to pick that up. It will naturally pick up the texture on the raised areas. So if you want some dry brush or some white in recessed areas, like here on the back where the spine is, you'll have to just go in with your brush and just brush that in. So that's really all there is to it. When I feel like my brush has gotten too dry, I'll go in dip it into more of my white paint, knock it off on my paper towel, and then just continue with the dry brushing until it's all done. So that's what I will do. So I'm going to carry on here and dry brush this entire thing. All right, dry brushing the white over this is complete, and it is dry. I'm going to play with some paint today. I'm going to try a couple of different things. Just as a disclaimer, I do not claim to be the best painter in the world. In fact, it's not one of my strong suits at all when it comes to painting sculptures. And normally, when I'm not filming tutorials, I'm making art, I create the sculptures, and then I pass them off to Yvette. Yvette's not really involved in the tutorials anymore, but she is still involved in Scarecrow Joe's studio, and she does a lot of the painting still for the studio. But anyway, This is one of those start to finish tutorials, so I'm going to attempt to paint once again. And what I have here, and it looks like coffee, it's not. It is some nutmeg brown. It's just cheap Apple Barrel brand acrylic paint. It's a matte paint. And I put some in there, and then I put some water in there, and I'm really watering. I really watered that down, so it's like basically brown water. And I'm going to brush this on, the whole thing. I'm going to let it dry, and then I'm going to go over it with some other colors of paint. My objective is to make this zombie head to look grungy and kind of dirty, like it just kind of crawled out of the ground. So that's what I'm going to attempt now, and I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to start from the top, and I'm just brushing over the hair and all of it. So it's extremely watered down paint. I'm not concerned about the black still showing or any of the other colors, the white, anything like that. I'm not concerned that any of that is still showing. I'm just brushing on this very thin nutmeg brown paint. I'm going to see how it looks after it dries, and then go back in and put some other paint in there. This might be a little too thin, so I may have to put another layer on it. We'll see what it looks like, or I'll see what it looks like after it's dry and kind of go from there. Alright, I put some of that nutmeg brown, very watered down paint on this. I don't think it's going to be enough, so I still have water in that cup. And I'm just going to take a little bit more of my nutmeg brown paint just to thicken it up a little bit. That still might not be, so I'm going to carry on, and I'll see how it looks. Alright, so this is dry, the wash of the nutmeg brown paint that I put on here. I do like the effect, however, it's very subtle. Like, it's just not enough. So I'm going to change my approach just a little bit here, and I'm going to use 3 combinations of paint: burnt umber, nutmeg brown, which is what I use for the wash, and then this is a burnt sienna. And I have my little paint palette here. The yellow, orange, and the greens, that's dry paint. The rest of it is my burnt umber, nutmeg brown, burnt sienna. And I have my chip brush here that I was using for the wash. And I think I'm going to go ahead and start on the back. And I also have on hand a little squirt bottle. So here I go. I think I'm going to start with the darker, this is the darker burnt umber. And I'm just going to kind of dab in some places, because I really want it to look like, I want it to look very dirty. Again, like I just climbed out of the ground. Like maybe this person during the zombie apocalypse just died. The people that were in this person's group didn't quite understand that it was going to be reanimated. And they buried him, and then it came back. He came back to life, right out of the ground. That's better, I think. I don't feel the need, I don't feel the need of using the spray bottle. The reason that I have that little spray bottle is if the paint got a little too dark or too thick, I was just going to spray over it. But it looks like it might be okay. I didn't want it to be too dark, but then again, I have the other colors that I'm going to go in and put over. if I do feel like, instead of spraying it, I still have that wash or that paint that's in there, just dip my brush in there. And I think this is a really cool effect because the gray that I've pretty much created with dry brushing the white over the black is still coming through in areas. So it's a really cool kind of a painting technique to use. But you know, as you're watching me paint and you haven't started painting, if you've been following along and you've gotten to this point and you have not started painting your piece, start thinking about your color palette, your choices. Maybe give it a backstory. Sometimes, you know, when I'm sculpting something, especially if it's like a character or a creature, I have a tendency to, you know, give them backstories as I'm kind of creating in my mind. I'm just sort of, you know, giving him a story. And that just kind of helps me to move forward in creating this character or this piece that I'm working on. So if that's something that could help you, think about that. Think about your zombie's backstory. Where did he come from? And there's so many different things that you can incorporate in this type of art with these zombie heads. You can put a hat on this guy, like a beat up old, you know, baseball cap. I got way too heavy-handed there with that brown. So I'm just gonna... And if you do get heavy-handed with the color, you can always go in with a paper towel and just blot. So, no big deal. But anyway, you could put, you know, create hats, put hats on your zombie heads. All kinds of cool things that you can do. You could even go the route of creating a cyborg zombie where you can incorporate, you know, bits and pieces of metal into him, making him look like a cyborg type of a zombie. Use your imagination when you're creating. All right, I think this is going to work out pretty good. I'm liking this a lot. It's not as subtle. We'll see what it looks like when it dries, but I'm just going to carry on and do the whole thing. I'm really liking this now. He looks dirty. It's the effect that I was going for. As you could tell, or maybe you can't, I don't know. I went to a smaller paintbrush, and with my little bit of my burnt sienna on my brush, very little bit amount over those veiny or those sinewy tendon areas that I put in there with the paper towel. And then like the string that I used, I just kind of hit those areas a little bit so that they stand out away from, you know, the muddy looking stuff. And I also, on this side as well, I put in a little bit of that paint. I don't want it to get to the point where it looks like it's made out of wood, which it could turn that way very easily. But I think once I start painting in some more of the wound or the flesh areas and bring that out, I think that's really going to make a difference. I don't think this is too dark. The thing about these acrylic paints is that when they dry, you know, they don't look the same color or the same hue as they do when they go on wet. So you really have to like take your time, you know, let it dry and then go back and revisit. And in those areas where I feel like it might have become too dark, I can always go back in there and dry brush a little bit of light brown paint onto there. But right now I think it looks pretty good. I did go in a little bit with that darker burnt umber, a little bit in there in the mouth. Yeah, pretty satisfied with this right now. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to concentrate on some of these areas in here. And I do have a different paint for that. I'm going to try, this is, the color of this paint is called Tapestry Wine. And again, it's a matte apple barrel acrylic paint. So I'm going to try that for these wound areas and see how that looks against this brownish, dirty looking paint coloration that I have on him. And then I'll come back to it. I'm going to take the same brush that I used. That it still has a little bit of that burnt sienna on it. But I'm going to take a little bit of that paint, tapestry wine color. Let me start in here. I just want to go in. You know, I'm just playing with paint. See how it's going to look. Go in here a little bit. You know, I'm not trying to be realistic. Again, I don't have to be because these are zombies. So I'm just really kind of concentrating on like getting that paint in those crevices of these wounds. I think that looks pretty good. Now, if you wanted yours to read as, you know, a little bit more realistic, then of course you're going to look at or use some reference pictures or look up what realistic wounds would look like as far as the coloration is concerned in them. Kind of at the back, that what I've just done here, I like it. I like the way that tapestry wine colored paint is kind of coming through where all that brown dirt colored paint that I kind of put on there. I like the way it looks so far. When it dries, it could dry looking completely different. I think I'm just gonna, or the veins or those tendons or whatever you want to call them, that I initially painted over with the burnt sienna. I just want to take just a little bit of that tapestry wine color and kind of go over those a little bit. So it's a different bit of a coloration from the actual wounds, but it's still kind of, I don't know, in my opinion, makes it a more kind of a cohesive piece. All right, I think I'm going to carry on and paint in all of these wound areas. And then I'll show you what it looks like after. It looks pretty cool. I was going to go in with maybe a different color and kind of go around the wounds, but I don't know. I'm on the verge, I could feel it. I'm on the verge of maybe doing too much. So, and that's a lesson that I continue to learn. I keep thinking, oh, well, I can do a little bit more here, or I could put a little bit more paint in you know, in the mouth area or whatever. And then once I do that, then I don't like it. So that's a lesson. You know, if you get to a point where you're like, wow, this is really cool, then stop. But there are just, and having said that, there are just a couple more things that I do want to do. I want to bring out these teeth a little bit more. I want them to stand out a little bit more. And also, I did put in some of that tapestry wine paint inside the eye socket that does not have the eye in it. That's not finished. There's a lot of areas in there where there isn't any paint or anything like that. So I need to finish that up. So I think with the teeth, I have this other paint here, and it's a, well, you can't really see what it reads, but it's Golden Sunset. So I have a little bit of that, and I want to see what it's going to look like if I just kind of dry brush over the teeth a little bit with that to bring out those teeth a little bit more. So, and I'm just barely dipping the brush in there, and I'm just kind of sort of like, you know, dry brushing. I don't want to get too much paint on there. I just want a dry effect. So let me just go in lightly. Might be a little too much. I'm going to go in with my paper towel and just wipe some of it off. And by wiping some of it off, I think that looks better actually. So it causes the teeth to stand out from the rest of the sculpture. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I like that. That's kind of cool. I'll see how it looks when it dries. So now I'm going to address the inside of that eye. I think what I might want to do is I'm just going to take this real, it's called Real Red, and I'm going to take a very small amount of that Real Red. I'm just putting it in my little paint palette there. Get a clean brush, and again, I'm just kind of knocking off a bunch of that paint. I don't want a whole lot in there. And I'm just going to go in pretty bright, and I'm not sure if it's gonna dry that bright or not. Like I said, playing with paint today. You know, if you get to a point where, you know, you're trying different things with paint, and then suddenly you're like, oh man, I really hate this. You can always paint over it. It's kind of a, you know, and nobody wants to do that because you're spending, you know, so much time on your piece and painting it and everything. And then when you get to a point where you're just like, yeah, I don't like it anymore. You know, you can always go in and paint it over, start over. I do like that it is going to dry a different color than the tapestry wine. Right now it kind of looks sort of pinkish, which is fine because if you do look at what wounds like that actually do look like, they're not like red. They're more of a pinkish color to them. I'm going to peel away the masking tape that I put over this eyeball. I'm still debating on if I'm going to put any more paint inside the mouth to kind of bring that out a little bit. I might. I mean, I don't know. I'm really afraid of screwing up the paint at this point, so I might just leave it. Probably go up and get Yvette's opinion on it in a minute, and then see what she says, because she's a much better painter than I am. But this is good practice. This is very good practice for me, and I enjoy it. I'm having a good time. So, and that's the other point. I mean, you don't have to be a master sculptor. You don't have to be a master painter, especially with Halloween art. I really don't think that you can go wrong creating Halloween art, especially things like these zombie heads. So there's a real close look here of the texture and the hair. The hair, it still stands out. It's very dirty looking, which, you know, I like. That was my whole goal. Okay, so I took this gruesome looking zombie head upstairs to Yvette to take a look at him and to give me her feedback. I was a little worried that it looked muddy, but then I told her my idea and the concept is that he just came straight out of the ground. So he was covered in dirt. And she says, well, if that's your concept and your idea, that's what it looks like. It looks like he came out of the ground and is covered in dirt. So I'm going to leave him. I did in some areas where it was got a little bit too dark. Because this is acrylic paint and it doesn't have any sealant on it on the sculpture yet, I easily was able to take a damp cloth and I gently just wiped some of the brown paint right off. Which is another reason why it's so important to seal your sculpture if you're using acrylic paint, especially the cheap acrylic craft paint that I use. And, you know, if I were to put this outside right now and it rained, it would all of the paint would be washed off. So that's one of the reasons to seal it. But we'll get to that after I'm finished up here. So I like the teeth. I like the coloration on the teeth. I think it came out really well. I'm pleased with that. The eye, Yvette's feedback on the eye, she said it looks great. I don't feel like I need to do anything else with that. Just kind of leave it as it is. She said the other feedback that she did give me was that to bring out the mouth a little bit more, make it stand out, and to use that same color red paint that I used for the eye socket. So that's what I'm going to do next. But the other thing that I went ahead and did was I removed the tape that I had placed over this eyeball. Some of the black paint you know, because I didn't do a great job in covering the eyeball completely. So some of the black paint did get on the ping pong ball eyeball there. Not a big deal. And then because the paint that I used was just masking tape, it wasn't a painter's tape, it wasn't waterproof. So when I did the wash, it dripped inside there. So I just need to clean that up a little bit. Again, not a big deal. In fact, I kind of like having the brown splotches of paint there. Again, I think it goes along the lines of him just coming out of the dirt. But in order to remove, because this is the black in here is the latex paint. So in order to remove that, I'm going to have to scrape it away. I just have this little sculpting tool and it's pointed, and that should allow me to just get in there and scrape that paint off. So I'm going to go ahead and scrape that paint right off. Alright, I'm going to get in there and dress the inside of that mouth with real red colored paint. I'm not going to be real meticulous about it. I'm just going to get some of that paint in there. Yeah, I think she was right. Bringing out more color into that mouth. That does look a lot better. So if you have somebody that you trust that's going to give you honest opinions and not like really hard critiques and be mean to you, I suggest that, you know, use those people, especially if they have experience in painting and those different types of things. Use them for their opinions. Something that I was looking at is the hair. And I was considering going in with maybe a little bit of black paint and trying to paint in some of the strands of hair to make those stand out a little bit more. I kind of like just the dirty, dingy nastiness of it. Especially like these pieces here that are hanging down. And all that's just residue from me dipping these strands of hair into my paste and then just sticking them, you know, putting the hair strands into the skull area and just letting it kind of form and get crusty. So that's what it looks like. It looks pretty freaking crusty. I'll give you a closer look here to the inside of that mouth and teeth area and then that eye. So this is pretty good. I'm happy with this. And here's the other thing to keep in mind, that when we do seal this, the sealant that we use, or that I use, is going to enhance the color. It's going to make the colors more vibrant and just stand out more. The colors are really going to pop. So if you think something looks muted or dull, after you apply that spar urethane sealant on there, because it does have, even if you get the clear satin, it's going to have a little bit of a gloss to it. That's just the nature of the product. So don't get something that's like that, it says gloss on it. You want to get the clear satin. But anyway, pretty much last thing I'm going to do is the eyeball here. So for the eye, I have some white paint, cheap white acrylic craft paint, and then I have a blue acrylic cheap. So what I've done is in a bowl here, the black paint in there is dry. So I put some of my white acrylic paint in there, and I'm going to just go in because I want this very, very pale, and this is already kind of a darkish blue. I'm just going to put like a drop. Let's just mix it up and see what kind of color I get. That's pretty light. I know it's going to dry probably a little darker, so I'm just going to dip another paintbrush into my white paint. And all right, I'm going to go with that. I think that might work. I do want to put just a tiny little pupil in there with some black paint. So I have my black paint. I have a very, very fine paintbrush. I don't need a whole lot of the black paint. One thing I have learned is that when you put the pupil, you color in a pupil over paint that's still wet, it'll mute it out. That's what I'm going for. So there we go. Another technique that you can use is just take your finger while the paint is wet and just kind of gently sort of dab around it. and then you get like the kind of the smudging effect right around the edge. So that's what I'm creating here with my pupil, giving it kind of a smudged effect. So it has a very faint bluish hue to it, and then while that paint was still wet, I dabbed in some of the black paint, and then with my finger I just went around, dabbed around, and kind of smudged it a little bit. And I don't know if you could see, but that brownish paint that was still in there because of the wash that washed down in through the masking tape, that's still in there a little bit too. So I think that's going to be pretty cool. I'm going to let that dry, and then after that is dry, I'm going to go in, and this is just a clear top coat, clear nail polish. And this is how you can make an eye or anything, maybe inside of the mouth or whatever you want to do to make it glossy or wet looking. Clear nail polish. Just get the cheap, dollar store clear nail polish, and that'll work for that. All right, as you can see, I finished up the paint on what I'm calling the mud zombie. He came out pretty good. Off camera, after he dried, and I did allow him to dry for like a day, I took him outside in a well-ventilated area and I sprayed him with a sealer. And what I prefer using is a spar urethane, and this happens to be Minwax, but there's a lot of different kinds of brands. I'm not sponsored by Minwax or this product. It's just what I like to use. So get a can of this. Make sure it's clear satin, because as you can see, even though it's clear, it's a satin. It still has a gloss, a little bit of a gloss to it. So if you don't want it super glossy, don't get a gloss. Get the clear satin. Anyway, this has been a really fun build for me. I love making these. They're a lot of fun. You really can't go wrong. So I hope you enjoyed it too. If you have followed along and you created a couple of zombie heads, I know I have a couple of subscribers out there that have taken the time to show me their progress on their zombie heads as they've been following along. Thank you for that. I really appreciate looking at your work and seeing how the tutorials are helping you and to be creative and to make some really cool art. So thank you for watching. If you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed and you've been watching some of the tutorials, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I do have some other tutorials coming up. I know at least one of them I'll be able to get done completely to you by the end or before Halloween. So that's a wrap on severed zombie heads. I'll catch you in the next one.